Today's lesson is number 96 from A Course in Miracles as applied to Unitarian Universalism. The lesson is, salvation comes from my one self. Self is capitalized. We have two selves. We have our ego self, which we normally think of as us as a person with our name, as our own ego. But the Course talks about self with a capital S as the Christ, which is all of humanity which God has created. In the metaphysics of the Course, there is only the non-dualistic oneness of God. And the idea is that God has created, extended God's self, capital S, into the universe, and it's all one. So we are the Christ. In Christian theology, there is God and the Christ is all of humanity whom God has created. And so today, when the lesson says salvation comes from my one self, it means that happiness comes from the non-dualistic oneness of which we all are a part. Salvation, also, another word for salvation, the way it's used here, is happiness, well-being. My well-being or my happiness comes from my one self. Shakespeare said in his play As You Like It, all the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts. And so there's part of us that's aware that a lot of what we take as quote-unquote reality is the many roles we play, the stages of our human life cycle that we go through. We're born as an infant, become a toddler, become a young child, then an adolescent, and then an adult, and finally a senior, and then our body dies and we move on. And so when Shakespeare nailed it. When we think about the human life cycle and all the roles we play, they are merely parts. And so the Course calls that illusions. We have illusions that we play many roles and we're different people who throughout our life have engaged in many special relationships, and so we experience many sides to our personality. And the Course teaches that none of that's real. It's all an illusion. The Buddhists say that we get into trouble because we become attached to the various roles and identities that we think we have throughout our life cycle. And so the lesson today is that all that's nonsense. Don't take it seriously. You need to step back and recognize that your salvation comes from your essence, which is the non-dualistic oneness from which we have separated ourselves. And don't get confused. Don't make the mistake of thinking that the drama and the pain and suffering, as well as the joy sometimes, that we experience here on the ego plane is real, because it's not. This too shall pass. as they say. So today's lesson is asking us to take 5 minutes of every hour just to remind ourselves that the many parts we play uh, on the world stage are just that. They're roles we play. It's not our real self. Our real self is the oneness that we share with our Creator. And in universalism, we believe that oneness is unconditional love. And once we're in touch with that, and we recognize that that's the source of our happiness, and we experience that happiness, we share that with all the people and the rest of creation we come into contact with throughout the day. Thank you for listening. Be well, stay well.